And we are. Good afternoon. It's goodness, what is it? Wednesday, January 21st.
Never know.
We had quite a bit of activity this morning down in the Senate Joint Committee hearing and heard from the Secretary. And now we can get to hear from the CFO of the agency to explain to us how we came up to the budget numbers that we are today. I appreciate everybody coming in a little bit early, just in case there's lots of questions before we move into the real budget discussion. So Candace, thank you very much for joining us. And if you can help us understand where we started with the gap and how we closed it, in addition to what was mentioned in the governor's speech and what we heard this morning, I guess you'll help us fill in the rest of the
Absolutely.
picture.
Absolutely. Okay, for the record, Candace Salmquist, Chief Financial Officer of the Agency of Transportation. I do have a slide deck, so I'm gonna share my screen here. Second.
Candace, they must have complete faith in you because everyone else that presented had a huge bench of supporters, and you're here all by yourself to face. They have total confidence in your handling this.
The executive team always turns out for the secretary. How interesting this is. Maybe I'll need other members of the executive committee to supplement later next week.
I just like to stir up trouble if I can.
Correct thing to say.
Okay, so I had a hunch that we would want to know where we started from back in September 2025, the $33 million that has received a lot of attention and has been talked about in a number of committees, to how we got where we are. So just as an overview, the $33 million hole that we talk about in transportation funds, that is from a 5-year outlook that the agency, myself, creates for the legislative committees. I did a September 25 update when we were presenting the expenditure reduction plan to the Joint Transportation Oversight Committee and the Joint Fiscal Office. We knew a couple components of that $33 million last session, and then 2 new components that I'd like to talk about now. So the components we knew last session are the $12.5 million, which was a transfer from the cash fund to the transportation fund that was in the 26 as passed budget. I think we discussed that at length last session. That was a one-time transfer back from 2025 legislative session, 2024 legislative session, 2025 budget. The other thing we knew about last session, which was talked about, was reversions, which were to be found at this fiscal 25 closeout to balance the 26 budget. When I was in this chair last session, that number started out at $4.5 million worth of reversions, but by the time the session concluded, the numbers had flipped to 5.4. And that was really because of legislative adjustments throughout the session. So we can see this 5.4 million here in pink. That's the carry forward balance from FY25. And then the 12.5 that I talked about earlier is in the bottom in pink. It's part of the 12.3. The reason why that cell on the operating statement doesn't exactly equal 12.5 is because there are a couple other transfers to and from happening from other funds. One fund is the motorboat regulatory fund, and another fund is the debt service fund. Just so you know, I wanted to flag where these 2 items that we already knew about live on our operating statement. The other 2 components of the $33 million gap in transportation funds from September, of course, the $7.8 million revenue downgrade in July 25. There was both a revenue downgrade in 26, which caused the expenditure reduction plan, and there was an equivalent and even a little bit greater revenue downgrade for fiscal 27. The remainder of $7.5 million was my estimate at the time of what we would need in payroll, benefit, internal service fund, and central garage transfer increases. And that was net against the position proposal that was a part of the September rescission plan. In addition to the statutory increases for town highway programs and backfilling the town highway non-federal disasters appropriation with transportation funds rather than pilot funds. So that That's what we knew in September. Questions on what the 33 million was comprised of? I know that was a lot. I'm gonna move on. That's fine.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Burke, please.
So where, are you gonna show us where the other rest of those 33 million?
So 12.5 plus 5.4 plus 7.8.
I'm confused because it said revenue sources. And I was adding that up, but then I wondered, when you said revenue sources, I didn't understand if that was part of the deficit.
Yeah, so those were revenue sources from the, oh, you know what? This should be FY 2026 as past budget
Okay.
rather than 27 as past budget. My apologies. I'm sorry, Representative. So those revenue sources in the 26 as past budget become deficits in the 27 budget because they're one-time in nature.
Okay.
So
So-
I agree.
If you're all set, yes. Okay.
What Molly's saying is the 12, it looks like when we're looking at this, that the 12.5 million was a transfer from the capital and essential event investments fund to the transportation fund.
Right, and because that was included in the FY 26 as past budget as a one-time revenue source.
This
knew
year,
we-
it's a,
Right, it's a down, yes.
so that's, I think, her question with the top two.
Right.
So the purpose of the slide here is we're in a $33 million hole. Where did the $33 million number come from?
Right.
The number came from these four main areas is why we don't have that. You can't, if it was a one-time transfer, that's not in the building of the 27. So we did a one-time transfer in 26. That puts us part of the hole. A big chunk of the hole is there. We did these reversions, which we can't do again, or we could potentially, but they were done, but that's not part of how you start building the budget. Okay, and then you have the other last two pieces. The revenue that the budgets are built on an estimated revenue. And if the revenue gets dropped, then we're down that money. You've got to find another way to deal with it, right? So that's the third one. And then all of the additional expenses and pieces would get you why we're 33 million behind when you started.
Right.
Okay. I don't know if that made any sense to everybody, but that's what I think I understand. This is what the whole came from.
Of these four numbers that equal 33 million, the most squishy is the 7.5, right? Because that's me really trying to project where we are going to be with health benefit increases, position movements, internal service fund costs, which don't come to us from the Department of Finance and Management until the end of December. So I was really trying to project a couple months into the future with the 7.5.
And squishy is an industry term?
Absolutely. All right, so how did we fare against where I thought we would be? Pretty good. This is a very number heavy slide. I'm just gonna rearrange what I'm seeing. Okay. We found $21 million of reductions in the appropriations and the ups and downs of the AOT budget. And that number is represented right here in green. Logan has a copy of our ups and downs, which are changes against the 26 as passed basically by account code and by DEPT ID. This is a rolled up summary of those ups and downs. If we count by DEPT ID, we can see that we had $21 million of reductions in budget reduction proposals, primarily in a modification to highway projects and position management savings. We can see that here, that program development and rest areas, the highways divisions, that's 5.3. Again, this is T fund only, and position management savings is 7.4. Beyond the $21 million in appropriation reduction, the governor's proposal also has a number of 12 million, which equates to an indirect cost rate that we will turn on for FHWA projects effective July 1st. We have turned on an indirect cost rate in the past in tight budget years. It is a 1-for-1 swap of transportation funds for federal FHWA dollars. So basically what we're saying is we're going to give up 12.25 million of transportation fund dollars. Or sorry, we're going to give up 12.25 million of federal FHWA dollars and get that amount in transportation dollars. But our federal apportionment doesn't stay or stays the same. So we're not increasing the amount of federal dollars we get. We are taking federal dollars that could have gone towards something else, like an FHWA eligible project, and putting it towards our transportation fund, effective July 1st.
So you can take federal highway money that would otherwise go to construction projects and turn them into T-fund money in a generally rare case. That then gives you the flexibility to put it across multiple programs to make the budget balance.
Yes, there is, a highly intensive, there's a highly intensive operating procedure that goes along with that. So my finance staff would want me to say that it's not as easy as flipping a switch. They are aware that we are going to be turning on the indirect cost rate on July 1st, and we are going to actively be preparing over the next 5 months in order to make that
When
happen.
you say they, you mean your finance department in this case?
Absolutely.
What would the Federal Highway Administration think, or when this happens? Does this happen commonly across the country, or is this a signal that there's a financial shortage in Vermont? What is this? What do our federal highway people, and maybe you're not the person to answer that question, I'm not sure, but what does it send for a signal?
I can give my opinion of what HWA thinks. I think it varies by state. It depends on the federal apportionment to that state and also the state dollars that they have available to match federal revenue. But for the state of Vermont specifically, I'm told, I'm also only in this role for like 1.5 years, going on 2 years now, but I am told that we have only turned it on in the past when we have been in a very tight state fiscally constrained environment. And typically FHWA has given us AOT more flexibility on projects that they approve because we do not turn on the indirect cost rate that often.
Representative Casey, and then
Is that something that we have to put back sometime? Is that,
We could theoretically leave the indirect cost rate on forever. There is an approval process. So right now our indirect cost rate only goes through the end of fiscal 27. We always negotiate with FHWA to ensure that we have the option of continuing the indirect cost rate. So when we're here for fiscal 28, I'd say regardless of the budget that's proposed, I would come here and say, we have the option to do it. We had the option to do it last year as well.
so, but it doesn't need to be, so doesn't necessarily need to be paid back then?
It does not need to
okay,
be
all right,
paid back. Yeah.
thanks.
Representative Lally, then Representative Burke.
I'm trying to understand more fully the implications of the indirect cost rate. So normally monies that come from FHWA, we use this for match, right? So does this preclude can we still use these for match? How do they get translated into meeting our needs versus their source and what they're allowed to do, if that makes sense?
So the 12.2 million of FHWA dollars that we'd be taking and using for our transportation fund operating statement would not be able to be used for match on a project.
There's a big cost to this potentially.
Yeah, we are giving up,
Opportunity cost, yes.
we are giving up the federal match rate. Yes.
This is a provision that allows the federal government's helping a state in effect fill other areas of their operating budget because they don't have enough to match the, or for whatever reason that might be.
The federal government's paying for administrative expenses for projects, eligible expenses. So we need to justify that every dollar is an eligible administrative expense. In in like comporting with the indirect cost proposal that we have on file with FHWA.
So to make the statement that it is under tight financial rare and only done under tight financial times, I would say if that means on top of a reduction in force and on top of a major change in fund shifting, that would pretty well amplify for the third or fourth level of amplification that we have a pretty tough financial budget situation. And in fact, that's like we've said it, and then we've done a major fund change, and we're doing a RIF, and we're pushing another button that we don't normally push unless things are pretty bad. Is that fair?
Absolutely. This was a very difficult budget year that everyone took seriously.
I guess at some point I'll learn a little slower than others, and I apologize for that. I'll catch on at some point, but this certainly, I'm not sure that I came away from this morning quite as clearly of how many levels of serious that it is, because I haven't heard this type of a statement before in terms of we're using something we almost never do. And we already did a reduction in force earlier this year, and we did another one. Okay, well, it takes me a little longer than others to learn, but Representative Burke, you had a question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, a couple. One is, if you're using that money, does that mean that that money would have had to have a match to use? So are we sort of saving money that way too, or not? Is that not correct?
In the absence of using the federal dollars for administrative expenses in implementing the indirect cost rate, it would have matched a project somewhere in AOT's budget.
So you get to use the money, but there's a cost to it too.
Opportunity cost, I'll use the same word, or same word as the chair did.
And can you use that money for town programs, for maintenance, for any of those things that are usually paid for just with T-fund dollars?
Not for maintenance, because maintenance does not have FHWA eligible projects. I believe some town highway bridge projects do have FHWA eligible projects.
To Representative Townsend, then back to Representative Arnold.
Yeah. So this is the first I've ever heard of this, which doesn't mean anything. So just by doing this, I think we're catching on, that it's taking the money that could be applied somewhere else. But it doesn't sound like there's any real penalty by FWA. FHW, sorry. So there's no like, oh, you're doing this, so you're going to be reduced here or any of that.
No, this is an allowable cost by FHWA. Historically, I hear again that FHWA has given us more leniency on projects because we have not implemented, but also they have not verified that. So.
And so you're able to take some of that, I'll call it project money, and apply it to some of the administration that helps put those projects together.
Yes.
And I would have assumed that that was part of when you say, here's a project, it's getting 80-20, that's some of that. Are you saying that there was never any administration costs in that 80%?
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we're applying some of that administration costs to the projects and not using state dollars. Which
Indirect.
Match.
I will clarify that it's like indirect administrative costs. The payroll of an engineer, for example, who's working directly on a project was being attributed to the project itself. Indirect administrative expenses might be like some of my time that I spend helping a project engineer reconcile.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have Representative Arnold.
Yeah, so I guess in my mind, I'm sort of thinking of this as, almost like a short-term loan that we're taking out against ourselves. To sort of make ends meet, kind of like, the credit card of us, that, just to, because we're in a fix. So I just, the opportunity costs are significant. So anyway, I'm glad to know that this is something we do as seldomly as possible. How often, like maybe in the last 5 years or so, have we had to do this? Or maybe that's not a good time frame because we've sort of had a lot of money coming in, but just in normal times, stuff comes up, you know, I mean, how often do we need to resort to this?
I am not sure whether we've turned it on in the last 5 years, but I can follow up with the committee on it.
So
Person with what?
defer that question to Representative.
Okay. What do you want?
Do you recall the last time we did something similar to this?
Well, reversion?
Yeah.
No, you
Indirect costs.
haven't been here for this part. We'll let
Yeah,
you
no,
catch
no,
up
no,
in a minute.
indirect, yeah, I mean, I think a couple.
Years, and I don't remember ever doing it in 8 years.
Well, they had to draw down, I don't know if it's similar, but I would say, Lenny LeBlanc was in your position, so whenever he was last year, they just draw down federal funds,
Yeah, I
it's a
Yeah, I
maneuver.
don't remember doing it. I was Sitting in.
Rob Peter to pay Paul or something like that, so to say. You know, yeah,
That sounds like a Lenny expression.
yeah, so
Okay.
whatever that time frame,
It
but
might
they
have
have
been-
done it since I've been up.
Might have
here.
been presented differently.
Yeah, exactly, yeah,
It's, oh, it's for this and that, instead of,
yeah,
you're presenting it as, this is a very unusual event.
well, it isn't, you know, he presented it, it's rare, very,
And I was not in here for that.
no,
I've been here 8 years.
yeah.
And I just don't.
Yeah. Here.
Oh, no. Alright. You come back. to it. So, in the second half of this piece, so the position management savings, 7.4, is that from what we heard this morning, or is that last fall's, is that last fall's changes plus some?
Yes, the 7.4 is inclusive of the September changes plus what we just heard this.
With both of those put together?
Yes,
Okay.
the secretary testified to 4.1
Yes.
this morning, so you could say 7.4 minus 4.1 is the effective September.
Okay, and we heard about the credit card piece. Rail and aviation, I know that we're gonna hear about rail a little bit here next. I guess the big question is the 1.1 million and whatnot. We heard a lot from aviation last year and a lot of enthusiasm around aviation. What are we gonna not do that we had heard that we were going to do? Are we gonna hear that later in the budget presentations, or are we gonna hear that to a certain describe now, or how's that gonna work? Same with the rail and same with, I mean,
I defer all of these individual line items to the division presentations to give more details on their budget.
when you have that level of money, then there would be noticeable specific things that we are just not going to be able to do now. Is that fair to say? Or that really
No,
need
I would
to
defer.
defer that entirely to them? Okay, but that's a significant amount of money out of each, maybe not, it's more to some and more to others. Reduction in state match available for projects within the program development division.
So those are highways projects, and I wanted this chart specifically to show you the 33 million, right? So we have the 21 in green plus the 12 in purple. So you could see as part of the green, we took a reduction to highways projects. But we heard in the governor's budget address yesterday and also from Secretary Flynn today that we're actually investing a great deal of the $10 million from the administration's proposal into highways projects. So,
Which has federally leveraged money, which is interesting since we're taking federally leveraged money to make it work. And I get a little bit confused on that. We're cashing in effect some federal money to T-fund money. So what would have been a 3 or 4 to 1 is now a 1 to 1. But yet we're going to take the 10 million and turn it into, I think that number would have been around 55 million in the numbers I saw earlier today. So we're going to leverage that pretty substantially. But before we can do that, we got to cash in and take some that would have been 4 to 1 or 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 and do it at 1 to 1.
right. So again, the agency's approach to the FY27 budget was to recognize where we were, the $33 million. in the absence of a new revenue source, this is what we have to do. And that's what the divisions built their budgets on. When the administration informed us that there would be additional dollars available, it was invested in my next slide. Oh, hold on, 2 slides. These projects. So if I go back 1 slide for a second, Chair, sorry.
You're quite all right. I'm just trying to catch up and figure it out.
Okay, so the administration's budget proposal language is right here on the slide, but it's also in the documents that can be found on the Department of Finance and Management's website. So basically, they are putting a cap on purchase and use tax deposits into the education fund, $10 million less each year until at year 5, the amount is 0. So the full amount of the purchase and use tax is going towards the transportation fund. So the effect to transportation fund over here, 10 million this year, then 21.6, 33.3. You can read the rest all the way up to 58. So the effect of this for only fiscal 27 are these projects. We identified 7 bridge projects, 9 paving projects, and maintenance tree cutting in 2 districts. Those bridge projects and paving projects do gather us $52 million in FHWA funds. And these projects are in the white book.
Are they notated anyway in there or just that we notice them? You know,
They are not noted. I'm sorry.
well, no, that's quite all right. I just, we can find them.
My last slide, oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. So in some ways you could look at it, yes, with the changes, we are going to have more work out in the field. But changes within the administration, some changes for some folks in some spots, and a significant fund change, but the work that needs to get done out on the entire, I guess, roadway and infrastructure is going to increase with these changes. Is that fair to say?
I would say, I'm going back a couple of slides now, but I would say the reduction to highways projects that we saw originally, this 5.3 million in T-Fund, is offset by the amount that we're investing as part of the new $10 million. The exact amount of the new $10 million for highways projects is 9.3. So we have more than made up for the reduction in the highways projects.
Representative Powell?
Are these projects ones that, as you know, were off the board and now they've come on the board, or are these just identified to equal the amount?
Chief Engineer Jeremy Reed will be able to speak to this, but these projects were not previously identified.
They were already in the book.
In the whiteboard?
They're in the
They
book
just got, now they
now.
got elevated.
No, they were not previously in
Okay,
the
I'm
book
sorry.
that when we did not know about the administration's proposal. But because we became aware of the administration's proposal before the governor's speech, we included these projects in the book.
They were already on a planning site somewhere. Oh, so
They were a part of a schedule, but not for 27.
it had to be already in the works to some
Yes.
degree or another under our sort of inventory and management control and how we decide and score projects.
Jeremy would say that all of these projects were pushed up from out years.
Well, that's a rarity in my limited time here.
Just trying to get clarification on the indirect cost of the federal change out to state dollars. When will feel that in the out years as far as an impact of funding? Does that have any ramifications down the road of, all right, now we got to own up to this act we did?
I think it really depends on the reauthorization of the IIJA, which we will know about in the coming months. I also I intend to do an update of the 5-year outlook again with the administration's proposal, but just have not had time to delve into it, to have it available today. But I assume that once I plug the administration's proposal into the Outlook, it's going to show us that we really should only have the indirect cost rate on for 2 fiscal years, fiscal 27 and 28. And that would be my recommendation.
But those 2 years, does that like affect our spending ability? Year 3 and 4, as we're moving money around, does it limit us to less federal dollars? Like, I'm just saying, there's gotta be a ramification what we're doing, because we just be doing. I'm trying to understand the money side of it in the out years.
We're taking money that would have otherwise gone towards projects.
Yeah,
And I could maybe throughout this session do multiple versions of the Outlook. But I think with what the administration has proposed with this amount of federal dollars over the next 5 years, it's going to show us that really we're going to value federal dollars in the future more than our state dollars now. Right now, we're very state constrained. If this proposal comes to pass, then we're going to value the federal dollar more than the state in a couple of years.
I guess, so over the next five years, there'll be, each year it increases. So this year's 10, next year's 21. So did I hear you say that you're thinking this year and next year we're going to be doing this revision, whatever you're calling indirect?
The indirect cost rate,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
that would be my proposal.
Okay, so just so we're aware of that, and what you're saying is this new 10 million that we're getting this year, 9.1 million of that is going into those new projects that you just had up on the board.
It's 9.3 representative,
9.3.
but yes.
Okay, I just trying to figure that out. And with that 10 million, it leverages about 52 mil. Okay,
And the remainder between that 9.3 and 10 million is for these maintenance tree cutting projects in District 5 and 6, which are not able to have an FHWA match. So it is the full $10 million. It's just we're only matching 9.3 of it.
and these projects here, up here, are, the town is responsible. Is this 80-20, 90-10? What is
I'm
this?
gonna have Jeremy speak to the
Speak to
splits
that,
on the
okay.
projects.
Thank you. I think I got it in my head. So then, well, one more question.
Yeah, please.
So if this 10 million this year leverages 52, it stands to reason that we're gonna get a whole heck of a lot more next year and the following year, because we're doubling next year. Good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yep.
And in your shop, there must be these hoops that you'll have to go through to document all of the indirect costs that are associated with every highway project. That is what you're saying. That there'll be a substantial more administrative burden to show everywhere possible that work that may be paid by these federal dollars or by these indirect costs.
Yes.
Is that an administrative burden that's going to involve additional staff or additional hours or additional?
Additional hours, not additional staff. We're relying on knowledge that is documented, but also knowledge of folks that were there the last time we turned it on. We need folks that have been around the agency that remember the last time that this was turned on.
Yes.
So can I just ask, is indirect costs, so it's kind of like having a homeowner's line of credit or something? I mean, you can use it or not use it, it's just available to.
No, I'll talk about the Agency of Human Services for a moment, Representative, and see if that works. So the Agency of Human Services draws or claims federal dollars for indirects on a majority of their grants. The Agency of Transportation historically does not, because we have a federal apportionment. Think of it as a limit. Like that number is not changing regardless of what we spend money on. For the Agency of Human Services, they have grants that are not apportioned, like Medicaid. So if they have eligible expenses and indirects, they get more federal dollars for both indirects and direct. I have one more slide. I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure again, Chair, sorry.
So I think I feel like I understand it better now than before we
Okay.
started.
Okay, good. This last slide is just about how we responded to the January 26 consensus revenue forecast. There was a bit of a downgrade in both the transportation fund and the TIB. In the transportation fund, the effect in 26 was $1.5 million. We are going to temporarily borrow from the stabilization reserve, but our FY27 governor's recommended budget has a transfer back to the stabilization reserve to get it back up to its 5% maximum. That's shown here, that we are temporarily dipping into the budget stabilization reserve in 26. That is also primarily because we were instructed by the administration and the Department of Finance and Management that we really should be handling the year-end reversions that we have done for many, many years in the BAA process, similar to every other agency and department. So that's transportation fund. In TIB, there is a $200,000 TIB impact in 26 and $100,000 TIB impact in 27. And I was able to confirm that both of these dollar amounts can be absorbed by the existing unallocated fund balance, which at the end of 27, after those two impacts, would be $2.2 million.
Is there a percentage reserve that you need to keep in TIP?
Not to my awareness. No, I don't think so.
But there's a healthy amount in there, right? 2.2.
There's a bit, yes. That is all I have for the committee,
That's all.
but
So
I'm also happy to come back at any time.
all right, well, I appreciate that. We've always had. I guess I won't share my thoughts. I did that already, walked through how we had the whole of the 33 million and where you plugged it, and then how the overall proposal of what we heard yesterday and this morning puts us in a spot to actually be doing more than we otherwise expected. But we have a lot of pretty significant adjustments before we get to that. So, okay.
Representative Pat?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a good time to make a general comment on the budget, where it's proposed and where it is.
I guess it's pretty
Sure.
open and we allow,
I just,
we allow a lot of
yeah,
conversations.
So
at
I
times.
did sign on to the bill that sort of said, hey, we gotta start looking at the transfer to transportation, to education on the purchasing use. So while I believe that's a good way good start at this, I also want to realize it's just a shell game, and the money that comes over from the purchasing use for transportation is property taxes that will have to be made up. And it's unfortunate, but I wish that this committee could look at gas tax, making sure the MBUF is, electric vehicles are paying their share. And those are definitely you're charging people who are using the transportation system for the transportation costs. And by doing just the one thing and not the other, I think is really just a shell game. So there's my opinion.
Well, we will certainly have committee discussion at this point, I guess. Once in a while, we'll let the ranking member have his,
Thanks.
spot in the piece. Were you raising your hand? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, just following on that, that this proposal sounds great, and then you said, well, what's the impact, have we? Obviously, I I imagine in the administration realm, there have been discussions with the agency of education and with the tax department. That, you know, we don't know what the discussions have been or what is, you know, what is the actual impact of this on that, on that in the fund? I'd just like to have that conversation.
I think that given where we are in our agenda, what I would want to say as the chair in this spot is that we spent, well, all of last session working with every one of the members, and everybody in this room did. We pushed on it very heavily to make sure everybody in the legislature understood the troubles. We also have pushed very hard. Many others have as well, and many others have escalated this to a spot where there is an opportunity here to take action on the structural issues facing the T fund. And that's what we wanted probably the most. How it actually is going to get settled out and where it'll finish. That's part of what our work here will be. We're only on day 2, but we did spend a lot of time, and many members of the committee and many other people have spent a lot of time to get this to the level of seriousness that would be viewed across the whole building, but also across the administration and now across all Vermonters everywhere. So sometimes be careful what you wish for, but we are now in a spot where the attention is there and coming up with a long-term solution to make sure that our roads and bridges are taken care of from now through, and that we're continue that policy of maximizing federal dollars. So I appreciate all of the time to help explain the whole and what the administration has done to proposed to solve it. And we're in day 2 of, day 1 of budget presentations, day 2 with the budget process. We're going to go through every single piece of the entire transportation budget like we always have. And I suspect the conversations will be much more robust, or continue to be robust, is probably a better way to put that. So I appreciate where you're coming from. And I think that we wanted to get to this spot. Not everybody maybe 100% approves of where we're at. We haven't come to that answer yet. We wanted to get to here. And there's been a lot of work to get to here. So now we'll go from there. So with that, thank you for coming in. We're going to take a 5 to 7 minute break while we move to our next agenda.